Buried deep in a forgotten chamber beneath Kensington Palace, a locked chest once belonging to Princess Diana is found. But it's what lies inside sealed letters and a recorded message that leaves Prince William stunned and trembling. It began as nothing more than a discreet renovation in one of the most remote and rarely accessed corridors of Kensington Palace. A team of restoration experts, quietly commissioned under the radar, uncovered a hidden panel sealed behind a wall that hadn't been touched in over 2 decades. Behind it, nestled beneath layers of time and dust, was an antique chest, its wood darkened with age, its brass hinges dulled but intact. The initials DS were engraved in elegant cursive on the top, flanked by an unfamiliar insignia that bore an eerie resemblance to Charlotte's birthdate woven in Roman numerals. At first, no one dared open it, but whispers travel fast in royal halls, and soon, the discovery was brought to the attention of a senior palace historian. When he arrived to examine it, his face turned pale. He recognized the signature immediately. He warned that whatever was inside could shatter carefully preserved royal narratives. This wasn't a mere keepsake box. This was a time capsule, sealed deliberately, hidden deliberately, and forgotten deliberately. The call to William came late at night. He arrived without fanfare, without security, without Catherine, or even Harry. Alone. Perhaps he already knew. Perhaps a part of him had always suspected his mother left behind more than memories. As he approached the chest, his breath hitched. The air was heavy with the scent of old paper and varnish, the kind that clings to silence. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside lay a stack of meticulously preserved handwritten letters, bound with a navy ribbon. A velvet pouch cradled a VHS tape, labeled in Diana's unmistakable handwriting, "To my son." And beneath that, an envelope so carefully protected, it was almost pristine, sealed with wax and marked with the words, "For my granddaughter." William didn't move. He couldn't. His eyes brimmed with tears before he even touched the letter. A wave of emotion, grief, shock, anticipation washed over him all at once. He clutched the envelope to his chest, as if bracing for a storm that had been gathering for decades. The silence in the chamber was broken only by the soft click of the VHS player, retrieved in haste by a royal aide. The screen flickered, and then her voice. But as the tape begins to play, Diana's voice fills the room, and what she says next changes everything. William thought he knew about his mother's intentions. Diana's voice, warm yet trembling, pierces through decades of silence, and she speaks directly to a granddaughter she never met. What she reveals is not only heartfelt, but dangerously defiant. The moment her voice echoed from the speaker, William's knees nearly buckled. It wasn't just the familiarity of her tone, it was the weight behind every syllable, as if she knew her words would resurface at a time of reckoning. Diana began not with a greeting, but a quiet warning. She expressed a haunting fear that her legacy would not survive the palace machinery. Not intact, not uncorrupted, her exact words were chilling. "If you're hearing this, something has gone very wrong. I'm afraid my truth may be buried before it can ever bloom." She spoke of dreams. Not metaphorical aspirations, but literal visions, she claimed, plagued her in the final months of her life. Dreams of a little girl with fierce eyes and a gentle heart. A girl misunderstood by many, yet destined to rise from the shadows. Diana didn't know her name then, but she described her as someone who would challenge expectations, bridge broken generations, and carry a piece of her that neither of her sons could. William froze. He didn't need to guess. She was talking about Charlotte. Somehow impossibly she had seen her. The recording turned darker, her voice tightening as she cautioned against a woman who wears the crown but lacks the soul to carry its weight. There was no direct mention of Camilla, but the implication was unmissable. Diana called her the force that will reshape what it means to be royal if no one dares to stop her. She feared the bloodline would lose its heart in favor of appearance. That kindness and authenticity would be traded for compliance and silence. The monarchy, she warned, would try to mold her granddaughter into a symbol. But Charlotte, she believed, was meant to be something far more powerful than real. Then came the part William would never forget. With unshakable calm, Diana named Charlotte as the true heir to her personal legacy. Not through formal inheritance, but by spiritual succession. She implored William, in the event of her absence, to protect this unnamed granddaughter and ensure she received what the crown would never publicly bestow: her truth, her voice, and her most sacred possessions. Among them, Diana described a tiara, her favorite one meant for the day she'll lead, not with a title, but with conviction. William couldn't hold back any longer. He clutched the tape recorder, tears streaming down his face, his shoulders shaking. The pain of losing her all over again mixed with the crushing realization that he now bore the responsibility of fulfilling a wish that could ignite a royal firestorm. This wasn't just a message from a grieving mother. It was a call to rebellion, carefully tucked inside a mother's love letter to a future she'd never see. But Diana's final words point to something far more controversial: an internal war brewing within the monarchy, and a woman she feared would stop at nothing to silence Charlotte's future. Camilla may have taken Diana's crown, but what if she's also tried to erase her legacy from within the palace walls? As the weight of Diana's message settles over William like a thundercloud, memories long buried claw their way back to the surface. He remembers the days leading up to his wedding, when Diana's belongings were quietly presented for review. It was a moment that should have been reverent, sacred. But Camilla had dismissed it all with a cold practicality that now echoes like a warning bell. She called the artifacts remnants of a different time, and questioned their relevance in a modern monarchy. William, eager to maintain peace, had said nothing then. But now he wonders, was that indifference just the surface of something far more calculated? Behind palace doors, rumors have always whispered like wind through old corridors. But now those whispers return with sharper teeth. Trusted aides speak of subtle manipulations by Camilla pressuring Charles to either store or outright auction pieces of Diana's collection. The rationale was always the same: preserve the dignity of the crown, make space for the future. Yet it was clear to those watching closely that it wasn't space Camilla wanted. It was erased. One tale, once dismissed as gossip, now haunts William. Years ago, a royal archivist claimed a letter addressed to my future granddaughter had mysteriously vanished from the royal vault. At the time, it caused barely a ripple. But with the discovery of the hidden chest, the puzzle begins to form a picture. The sealed envelope inside, marked with Diana's handwriting, includes a chilling detail of Camilla's name, violently scratched out in thick ink. Beneath it, 5 damning words: "She must never wear this." Suddenly, everything shifts. Catherine, too, once raised questions. She had asked about a sapphire pendant, a piece Diana was known to treasure, one that mysteriously disappeared without record. No explanation had ever satisfied her, but she had let it go, assuming protocol had swallowed sentiment as it always did. But now, William can no longer ignore the trail of absences, the missing items, the altered records, the deliberate distancing from Diana's memory. This is no coincidence. It is a pattern of slow, strategic dismantling of a legacy that threatened to outshine the present monarchy. Now, William stands at a crossroads. Does he bow to the demands of royal continuity? Or does he honor the sacred wish of the woman who gave him everything? The institution demands silence, but his mother demands the truth. His duty as a prince collides with his love as a son, and the fracture is tearing him in two. Still reeling from the tape, from the letter, from the accusations etched in ink, he knows one thing. He can no longer play the part of the obedient heir. But before William can act, palace aides deliver another shock. There's a second envelope, labeled for Catherine, and it holds a warning that turns her world upside down. Catherine reads Diana's private words with trembling hands, but her admiration soon turns to fear. Was she ever meant to be queen? The envelope, delicate yet heavy with weight, bore her name alone. No royal title, no formal address, just Catherine. And as she opened it, her heart pounded with a dread she couldn't explain. Inside, the letter was written in Diana's unmistakable hand. It began with warmth, almost maternal, as if Diana had been watching her all along. She called Catherine a quiet warrior, a woman of strength veiled in grace, the kind the public would adore, but the palace might underestimate. Diana acknowledged her pain, her silence, and her sacrifices, and praised her for the battles she had fought that no one ever saw. But as Catherine read on, the message shifted. Diana's tone darkened, not with resentment, but urgency. She warned of a time when Catherine would no longer be protected by admiration alone. "You will be tested," Diana wrote, "not by the people, but by the very crown you were asked to serve." The words gripped Catherine's throat. Diana cautioned her to guard her heart, not just for herself, but for her daughter. Charlotte, she wrote, would become a mirror through which the monarchy might try to rewrite its past and sculpt its future. "They will try to make her a symbol," she warned, But you must make sure she stays a soul. The letter was more than a message. It was a prophecy, a web of veiled truths laced between loving advice. Catherine paused on a line that chilled her. Look to the ones wearing crowns they never earned. Her eyes darted instinctively to Camilla's portrait across the room. Diana had never needed to say her name. The implication was enough. Emotions surged within her. Fear, confusion, rage, but also a deep sense of clarity. This was no longer about loyalty to a family. It was about protecting the innocence of a child who was unknowingly standing at the center of a legacy war. Catherine wiped her tears and found resolve in Diana's final words. You are stronger than you know, and she will be too because of you. That night, Catherine sat beside William and read the letter aloud. Each line carved itself into their hearts. There was no longer room for hesitation. Diana's vision had become their mission. Together, they made a pact, a silent vow to defend Charlotte's destiny, to preserve Diana's memory, and to challenge the throne itself if it ever dared to rewrite their truth. The next morning, Charlotte innocently wanders into the room, asking why everyone looks so sad and unknowingly triggers the next royal explosion. A tiara once worn by Diana resurfaces. But when Charlotte wears it during a private family gathering, Camilla's reaction is nothing short of explosive. The tiara had remained untouched for decades, buried beneath velvet, protected in silence. Catherine had hesitated to open the final compartment of the chest, knowing that whatever was inside held more than jewels, it held defiance. Nestled within, the sapphire-studded crown sparkled like a challenge aimed directly at the throne. It wasn't just a piece of royal jewelry. It was a legacy, a symbol of everything Diana had stood for and everything the monarchy had tried to bury. Quietly, deliberately, Catherine brought it home. That evening, as the family gathered for a subdued dinner behind closed palace doors, the atmosphere was meant to be calm. No photographers, no formal announcements, just the core of the family. Charlotte, innocent yet radiant, spotted the tiara laid carefully on her mother's dresser and asked the simplest question of all, "Is this from Granny Diana?" Catherine nodded and placed it gently upon her daughter's head, brushing back a curl. It was meant to be a private moment, but the gesture became something far more powerful. As Charlotte entered the room wearing the crown, time seemed to pause. Conversations stopped. Heads turned. William's breath caught in his chest. And then Camilla walked in. Her smile vanished the moment her eyes fell on the tiara. She froze, her posture stiffening as though struck by something invisible yet lethal. The room plunged into silence so heavy it nearly cracked the walls. Camilla's voice sliced through the tension like glass. She accused Catherine of orchestrating a spectacle, of using Charlotte to make a statement, of resurrecting the past to undermine the present. Her words weren't just bitter, they were venomous. She labeled the moment as political theater, a deliberate act of rebellion. Catherine remained composed, but William had heard enough. For the first time in years, his voice rang out with thunderous conviction. He ordered Camilla to leave, not as a prince of the realm, but as Diana's son. The room didn't just fall quiet, it shattered. Later that night, royal correspondents began murmuring of renewed tensions between Camilla and the Wales household. Anonymous sources described a deeply uncomfortable scene during dinner, and noted that something long buried had been brought violently back to the surface. Social media exploded with images of Diana's tiara, though none had been released. The idea alone was enough to ignite comparisons, conspiracy theories, and quiet support from the public. The world had been reminded of a legacy the palace wished forgotten, but what the press doesn't know is that William has already taken the next step. An emergency meeting with King Charles that could tear the family apart. William storms into a private meeting with King Charles and makes an impossible demand to fulfill Diana's final wish or watch the monarchy crumble from within. There were no formalities, no royal etiquette, no prepared notes. William walked into the drawing room like a storm breaking through stained glass. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't wait to be seated. He simply dropped Diana's letter and the tape recorder onto the polished table between them and said, "You need to hear her, right now." Charles glanced down at the items but didn't reach for them. His silence was heavily calculated, even but William didn't flinch. He stood there, face pale but burning, with a fury that had been held in place for far too long. He began not with accusations but with pain. He spoke as a son who had watched his mother be humiliated, stripped of dignity, and then immortalized as a threat to the very institution she once served. A son who buried her too soon and was then expected to smile for the cameras, wave for the nation, and never speak her name in defiance. And now, he told his father, her voice had returned not from memory, but from truth. From beyond the grave, she had spoken directly to her granddaughter, and her final wish was not a royal request. It was a warning, a plea, a prophecy. Charles remained still, his hands clenched, his jaw locked, but William pushed forward. He demanded that the monarchy formally recognize Charlotte as the keeper of Diana's personal legacy, that the letters, the tiara, the pendant, everything his mother had protected, be passed down publicly and permanently. He warned that to deny this now would not only betray Diana again, it would fracture what little trust the public still had in the House of Windsor. "This is bigger than protocol," William said. "This is justice. It's time we stop pretending that Camilla's version of this family is the one the people want." The word Camilla cracked the room. Charles's eyes flared, but he still didn't speak. William pressed harder. "You've let her rewrite history, and I stayed silent for the sake of peace. But this is where it ends. Either you honor what Mum asked, or I will, and I won't do it quietly." For the first time, the air wasn't pleading. He was warned. Charles inhaled, then spoke 5 words that landed like a blade. That crown was never hers. The silence that followed was deafening. William's chest heaved. His father didn't budge. The rift between them, decades old, had just split open again, wider than ever. But even as William prepared to walk away, a new presence entered the room. One neither man had expected, one whose voice would tilt the balance in a direction no one could have foreseen. But just when it seems Charles will reject his son's plea, an unlikely figure steps in, and her words will change the course of royal history. Anne, long considered the monarchy's stoic pillar, steps forward with a secret she's guarded since Diana's death, a truth that vindicates William and Charlotte. The tension that lingered in the air after William's confrontation with Charles was still raw when a quiet knock came at the Wales's private door. It wasn't a royal aide, it wasn't the press, it was Anne. And she didn't come with protocol or palace instructions, she came with something far heavier. In her hands, she carried a leather-bound journal that looked aged and worn, but within its pages was something no title or throne could overwrite. As she sat across from William and Catherine, her tone was deliberate, stripped of ceremony. This wasn't Princess Anne the Royal. This was Anne, the sister who had watched history twist Diana's truth and had held back a tidal wave for far too long. Anne admitted something few had ever heard her say aloud. Diana had trusted her more than most ever knew. And before her passing, Diana had sent her a journal, not for safekeeping in a vault, not for public release, but as a record of her thoughts, her fears, her dreams. And within those pages, a revelation that shattered what they thought they knew. Diana had written clearly, without hesitation, that she believed the monarchy was starving for empathy, and that the future wouldn't be saved by tradition, it would be saved by transformation. She envisioned a legacy not through sons or heirs, but through a granddaughter, one who would carry her fire, her softness, her courage, and she named that hope Charlotte. Anne's voice cracked for the first time as she spoke about the battles she had silently endured. She admitted to confronting Camilla privately years ago, arguing over Diana's legacy, over the quiet disappearance of her possessions, over the way her memory was being diluted. But Anne, ever loyal to the structure she was born into, had swallowed her truth in the name of unity. Now, she realized that silence had only allowed the erosion to deepen. She slid the journal across the table, her eyes locked with Catherine's. At that moment, the titles disappeared. They were just 3 people bound by one woman's words. Anne declared, without wavering, that Charlotte must receive what Diana intended. The jewels, yes, but also the story, the purpose, the unspoken responsibility of protecting a legacy forged not in palaces, but in pain. For William, it was a turning point. He was no longer a lone soldier in this battle. With Anne's blessing, the scales began to tip. It was no longer just Diana's son and her granddaughter rising. It was her own sister standing beside them, bearing witness. As the monarchy braces for backlash, William takes one final, irreversible step, publicly honoring Diana's final wish in front of the world. During a global royal event, Charlotte appears wearing Diana's forbidden tiara standing center stage beside her father. The crowd erupts. The monarchy will never be the same. The world had gathered for the Platinum Jubilee, expecting pomp and tradition. But what they witnessed instead was a reckoning wrapped in elegance. Amid fanfare and ceremony, the royal balcony moment, the most symbolic of all, became the stage for a quiet rebellion. As the doors opened and the royal family stepped into the blinding sunlight, murmurs turned into gasps. Charlotte, hand in hand with William, emerged not just as a royal child, but as the living echo of a legacy long buried. Upon her head sat the sapphire tiara, Diana's tiara, the very piece once deemed too dangerous to be seen again. No announcement had been made, no statement prepared. But in that single moment, everything changed. The crowd didn't hesitate. Applause erupted, not for the pageantry, but for the memory they saw resurrected in a young girl's eyes. Social media exploded in real time with photos circulated across the globe with captions like, "Diana Reborn," "The Crown's Reckoning," and "The Future Has Arrived." News anchors fought back emotion as they narrated the moment. For the first time in decades, the public saw a royal statement, not made with words, but with truth, history, and inheritance. Charlotte stood tall beside her father and mother, not as a pawn of monarchy, but as a continuation of something the world had never stopped mourning. Camilla, hidden behind the curtain, watched it unfold in silence. She had been noticeably absent from the main balcony photo. Officially, it was said to reduce crowding. Unofficially, it was everything she feared. Her grip on the public's sympathy fractured in a single image. The Queen's portrait, hanging solemnly in the background, cast an unintentional blessing on the moment, her gaze set gently behind William and Charlotte, as though acknowledging the return of something sacred. And then, William stepped forward. For the first time in a royal event since her death, he spoke Diana's name. His voice was steady, but every word carried the weight of years spent in silence. "Today," he said, "we honor not just a jubilee but a promise to protect the light of those we've lost, and to pass their strength forward. My mother, Diana, dreamed of this day, even if she didn't live to see it. She believed the future would one day be shaped by love, not protocol. That future stands beside me today." The palace, under pressure to respond, issued a statement within hours. It was brief, but historic. It confirmed that Princess Charlotte had received a selection of personal heirlooms once belonging to Diana, by the explicit request of the family. The tone was respectful, but the subtext was clear: the institution had yielded, even if reluctantly. But even in triumph, William knows the war isn't truly over, and what lies ahead could test Charlotte in ways no child should ever face. As the world watches Charlotte rise into the spotlight, the question remains: can she carry the weight of her grandmother's shadow without breaking beneath it? In the days following the balcony appearance, as tributes flooded in and Diana's name once again took center stage in headlines around the world, William and Catherine found themselves confronting a new kind of fear, not for themselves, but for the little girl at the center of it all. They had made a choice, a bold one, and now they would have to protect the path they'd set in motion. Behind closed doors, they made a solemn vow to raise Charlotte not as a symbol, but as a soul, to teach her to lead with heart, with courage, with the quiet strength Diana once dreamed of but never got to see flourish. They would give her the tools to survive not just the public adoration, but the weight of expectations hidden behind palace walls. But as they stood beside their daughter, factions were already forming within the corridors of power. Some whispered of a new future, one where Charlotte could modernize the monarchy with grace and empathy. Others viewed her rise as a threat, a disruption of carefully preserved hierarchies. Old guards murmured about precedent, bloodlines, and proper roles. The war Diana had warned of hadn't ended, it had only changed form, and Charlotte, though unaware, was now its focal point. One afternoon, after hearing her name once again mentioned on the news, Charlotte turned to her mother and asked a question that cut through the tension like a blade. "Why does everyone keep talking about Granny Diana?" Catherine knelt beside her and chose her words carefully. "Because you're the reason she never gave up," she whispered. "Because when she felt most alone, she believed someone like you would come." Later that week, in an unpublicized visit, William took Charlotte to Althorpe, the place where his mother rests. There, with hands still small and eyes full of quiet curiosity, Charlotte placed a replica of the sapphire tiara at the base of her grandmother's tombstone. William didn't speak. He simply watched as a new chapter silently sealed itself. The image of Charlotte looking up at him, full of hope and trust, became a moment neither of them would ever forget. It wasn't just an act of remembrance. It was a handoff, a sacred one. And as the sun sets over Althorpe, one thing is clear: Diana's voice may have been silenced, but her wish echoes louder than ever through the girl who now carries her name, her crown, and her legacy. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.